The steam from her coffee curled into the quiet air of the Admiral's office, tracing ghostly lines against the glow of the planetary defense grid beyond the window. Admiral Catherine Hayes stared at the flickering holodisplay hovering above her desk, her hand frozen halfway to her lips. The news had hit like a silent detonation, no alarms, no chaos, just cold data. 3 colonies gone. New Sydney, Europa Base, gone AIM Station. The numbers came next. 8 million lives. Vaporized in what the Nexar coalition described as a measured response. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez stood on the far side of the desk, shoulders rigid, jaw tight. That was their word, ma'am. Measured. The Admiral slowly lowered her mug to the desk with a soft click, the kind that marked a seismic shift in command rooms across every ship she'd ever served on. Measured, she repeated, almost thoughtfully. Her voice was calm, too calm, which Rodriguez, a seasoned officer, recognized as catastrophically dangerous. They said, he added, his throat dry, that humanity's colonial expansion was a threat to galactic stability. That this attack would serve as a deterrent. Hayes stood, smoothing the front of her uniform. Lieutenant, are you familiar with the term sleeping dragons? Rodriguez blinked. I don't believe I am, ma'am. She walked to the wide observation pane. Earth glowed beneath the Terran defense fleet like a candle nestled in the dark sea of space. Beyond it, thousands of vessels stood in formation, ships that hadn't fired a shot in decades, held in reserve by a civilization that had chosen peace over dominance. There's an old human proverb, Hayes said, her voice low. Let sleeping dragons lie. Some say it was about kings or armies or monsters. But the real meaning's simpler, don't provoke a force you don't understand. She turned to face him, eyes alight with something that hadn't stirred in years. We've been good neighbors, Lieutenant. Friendly traders. Cooperative diplomats. Not because we're passive, but because we remember. We remember what we're capable of when we stop holding back. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. The Council. The Council, she interrupted, asked us to lead by example. So we did. We poured our brilliance into medicine, art, terraforming, diplomacy. We chose restraint. But make no mistake, restraint isn't weakness. It's choice. She tapped her desk. A galactic map flickered into view, zooming out to reveal the systems humanity had touched, and those they hadn't. Nexar space pulsed in red. They think this teaches us our place, Hayes muttered, but all it's done is remind us who we really are. Deep down. Another screen lit up. Shipyards on Luna, quiet for decades, were activating. Civilian freighters were pulling into dry docks for sudden refits. Data streams flowed like rivers, encrypted, complex, invisible to outsiders. All coordinated, all calculated. Hayes gave a humorless chuckle. The Nexar think they've shocked us into silence. But they've woken something instead. Ma'am, Rodriguez said, are you saying we're preparing for war? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped closer to the fleet map and gestured. You see those ships? The ones labeled civilian logistics platforms? There are nuclear carriers in there. Particle lance frigates. Prototype quantum tunneling platforms. They're hidden in plain sight. We never decommissioned them. We just disguised them. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Why? Because Earth is peaceful, she said. But Earth is not naive. Silence stretched. Then Hayes walked back to her desk and opened a secure channel. Activate Protocol Omega. Full fleet readiness. I want all diplomatic channels monitored. No response to the Nexar message. Not yet. Rodriguez hesitated. And the colonies? She paused, then spoke, quiet as a razor sliding from its sheath. We rebuild. And when we do, we remember. And the galaxy will remember, too. The coffee had gone cold, but the fire in her eyes had just ignited. Across the stars, the Nexar containment fleet stood in perfect formation, disciplined, symmetrical, confident in their doctrine of deterrence. From their elevated view, Earth was a rogue ember, a world that had expanded too far, too fast. Senior tactician Raxi Val paced the polished obsidian floors of the Nexar command spire, the tips of their sensory frills pulsing red with agitation. "They are not retreating," Val said, voice trembling with disbelief. The demonstration was clear. Calculated. The loss ratio alone should have triggered instinctive withdrawal. A hesitant voice rose behind them. "Yet the human response," said Tekmora, a junior analyst whose display tendrils flickered with confusion, "is active mobilization." Val turned sharply. "Active what?" "They've recalled all exploratory ships to Sol. Civilian freighters are being retrofitted with military-grade shielding and weapons. Defensive satellites once thought ornamental are now emitting deep-structure energy pulses." Mora paused, his tendrils curling tight. "Their entire system is waking up." A silence fell over the command center like a smothering curtain. Then another voice, low and grave, spoke from the corner of the room. "You made the same mistake everyone does," said Zinder, cultural specialist and historian of galactic conflict. Unlike the others, Zinder was not panicking. But his research tendrils, each etched with lifetimes of sociological study, were coiled tightly in a rare show of alarm. Val turned. "Speak clearly, Zinder." The specialist stepped forward, eyes glowing with data streams. "You misunderstood the humans. Their history isn't one of weakness. It's one of restraint. They've spent centuries binding their instincts behind treaties and exploration. Not because they forgot how to fight, but because they remembered too well." Tekmora flicked through the xenopsychological files. "But the profile said." "Burn it," Zinder cut him off. "Burn the profile. You based your analysis on outward behavior. But behavior is a choice. And they've just made a different one." He turned to the main viewport. "You gave them something they haven't had in centuries. Moral clarity." Val narrowed their gaze. "Explain." "You bombed civilian colonies. Without warning. Without provocation. You handed them a justification written in ash and blood. And now," he pointed to the tactical display as another surge of ship activity was logged, "they are responding not with panic, but precision." A tremor rippled through the chamber as red pulses erupted across the holomap. Human systems lighting up like neural synapses. "New ship classes," Mora whispered. "Thousands of them. War cruisers, dreadnoughts, stealth destroyers, none of which were in our intelligence reports." Val's frills went flat. "Where were they hiding these?" "Everywhere," Zinder said. "In plain sight. Disguised as cargo ships, terraforming rigs, science stations. Each one armed, trained, and prepared for the exact scenario you thought impossible." A fresh alert blared. "Priority signal, Nexar Border Patrol Station Gamma 14, offline." Another followed. "Station Theta 9 reporting weapons lock. No, wait, they're gone. The station's gone." The room exploded into a frenzy of unreadable data. Zinder stepped calmly to the center of the chaos and pulled up a single, stabilized feed. It showed Earth. But not Earth as the Nexar had seen it, small, isolated, fragile. This Earth was a crucible. A forge of innovation and paranoia, of beauty and war. In orbit, thousands of starships gathered like ravens over a battlefield. "What you never understood," Zinder said, voice low, "was that humanity built peace atop a mountain of sharpened stones. They are explorers, yes. Scientists, philosophers, artists. But every tool they create has a second edge. Every probe doubles as a missile. Every outpost is a fortress in waiting." Val watched, their breath shallow. "So what do we do?" Zinder finally turned away from the window. His research tendrils loosened, just a little. "We wait," he said. "For what?" "For them to make a choice." Outside, Earth's skies burned not with war, but with preparation. Humanity had not yet struck. But every move they made said the same thing. We remember. And now, so would the Nexar. The bridge of the TDF remembrance stirred with calculated tension. Gone were the days of quiet patrol and ceremonial voyages. Now, every console glowed with purpose. Every officer stood sharper. Every breath carried the weight of history in the making. Admiral Catherine Hayes stepped onto the command deck with her usual quiet presence, and the room locked into synchrony. Outside the viewports, hundreds of civilian-looking vessels were undergoing a metamorphosis. Panels slid away. Coatings peeled back. Beneath layers of camouflage, the true face of Earth's military power emerged, thousands of warships, long hidden in plain sight. "Status report," Hayes said, her voice calm, commanding. "Fleet-wide readiness confirmed," replied Commander Anjali Patel, eyes never leaving her glowing tactical board. "Quantum relays synced. Subspace communications dark. Operation Wake-Up Call is green across the board." The Admiral approached the central holomap, where the Sol system lit up like a neural pulse. Ships gathered at pre-designated jump vectors, orbitals were activated, and the Ghost Fleet, silent watchers hidden for decades, was fully online. "How's the Nexar jamming effort holding?" she asked. "They believe their ECM systems are working," Patel said, smirking. "We've let them think that for months. Meanwhile, all of our comms are running on a dormant mesh protocol, optical quantum bounce. Redundant. Untraceable." Hayes gave a small, approving nod. "Just like we planned." She glanced up at the forward screen where fleet movements shifted into final alignment. It had taken nearly a century to build this response net. A hidden doctrine of deterrence wrapped in diplomacy. A silent strategy: speak softly, but prepare the spear. And now, the spear had awoken. "Special delivery?" she asked. Patel hesitated. "Psych Warfare has the package ready, ma'am. All fleets have encoded copies for simultaneous broadcast at time of jump." Hayes arched an eyebrow. "Worried about the message, Commander?" "Only that it may cause permanent emotional trauma to the Nexar High Command." "Sometimes," Hayes said, her voice like the edge of a monomolecular blade, "the old methods are still the best." She opened a private command channel, one that bypassed every layer of diplomacy, oversight, and restraint. "All ships," she said, "this is Admiral Hayes. Our colonies were not just places, they were homes. Our people. Families. Children. 8 million lives extinguished." The silence across the fleet deepened. Her voice echoed in every command bridge, every corridor, every helm station. "They thought they were teaching us a lesson. Instead, they've given us permission to remember who we are. A beat. They think we've gone soft. That our smiles are surrender. That our treaties are shields against our nature. But we remember. We remember fire." She looked toward the viewport as the stars began to distort with the pre-jump charge. "Broadcast the message on all frequencies." A technician turned, hesitating. "Are you sure, ma'am?" Hayes' lips curled into a predatory grin. "Let's show them what happens when you wake the dragons." Her hand hovered over the command interface, the jump sequence glowing in red. Then, in unison with every ship in the fleet, she said, "Jump in 3, 2, 1, mark." The remembrance surged forward, vanishing into quantum displacement. So did the rest of Earth's vengeance. Behind them, only vacuum remained, and a message now echoing through every Nexar channel, unstoppable, untranslated, and terrifying in its clarity. "We didn't build these ships because we wanted war. We built them because we remember. You took 8 million lives to teach us our place. Now we'll teach you ours. Dragons don't seek fights. But once awakened, they don't stop until the fire dies. And you're out of ash." The Nexar Rim, once a quiet barrier of military confidence, was in flames. It began with silence. No warning, no fanfare. Just the sudden and absolute disappearance of 5 Nexar border defense stations within seconds. Automated alerts failed to trigger. Surveillance arrays returned static. And then, like a blade through flesh, the human fleet appeared. They came not in chaos, but in orchestration. Thousands of ships exited quantum displacement in perfect formation, their hulls humming with power. What had once been trade vessels now unfurled into war machines. Panels slid open to reveal plasma lances. Cannons deployed from disguised cargo bays. Orbital stations once thought dormant powered up with planetary-scale energy. The Nexar didn't know where to fire first. Not that it mattered. Within 2 hours, the entire Nexar outer defensive perimeter had collapsed. Precision strikes knocked out energy grids, shield networks, and communication spires. Every human weapon system was purpose-built, fine-tuned to exploit specific weaknesses in Nexar defenses. Because humanity hadn't guessed, they'd studied. To our analysts, one intercepted human transmission read: Nexar doctrine is a solved equation. In the Nexar High Command Dome, panic had replaced pride. The walls pulsed with alert red light as shattered generals argued over impossible data. And yet Zinder, the cultural specialist, stood silent, his tendrils coiled in resignation. They're not invading, he finally said. What? Barked Raxi Val, the tactician whose plans now lay in tatters. Zinder turned to the holographic map, now pulsing with human fleet signals, all advancing, methodical, deliberate, unrelenting. They're educating us. Val's sensory frills flared in confusion. They're tearing apart our infrastructure. Not to conquer. To demonstrate. Their objective isn't dominance. It's understanding. Val stared at the screen as human ships bypassed population centers, targeting only military installations, weapons facilities, and tactical infrastructure. A fresh alert lit up the room. Nexar core worlds, strategic blackout confirmed. Planetary defense AI disabled. Without breach. Impossible, whispered one of the generals. Zinder closed his eyes. They've been preparing for this for 100 years. Every handshake. Every cultural exchange. Every trade agreement. It was data. Behavioral mapping. Signal studies. Encryption testing. Val's voice cracked. So this is punishment? No, Zinder said softly. This is restraint. Back on the TDF Remembrance, Admiral Catherine Hayes stared at the tactical holomap. Her hands clasped behind her back, she watched another Nexar shipyard fold in on itself under a silent, coordinated strike. Time elapsed, she asked. 4 hours since initial breach, Commander Patel replied. Outer defenses are neutralized. Core sectors disarmed. Civilian areas untouched. Hayes nodded. Open the line to Nexar High Command. A moment later, her holographic image materialized inside the Nexar command spire. The room went still. Every Nexar eye, frill, or photoreceptor turned toward her projected form. Let me be perfectly clear, she said, her voice low and razor-sharp. We could end you. Every planet. Every fleet. Every station reduced to dust within 15 minutes. The room shuddered in the silence that followed. But that's not who we choose to be. Val stepped forward, trembling. Then, what are your demands? Demands? Hayes smiled coldly. This isn't a negotiation. This is a lesson. A data stream burst through the communication link, blueprints, maps, logistics scans, all of it Nexar. All of it annotated, marked, and analyzed by human military intelligence. You see, Hayes continued, we don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. What we want is peace. But not the kind born of submission. The kind born of understanding. Raxi Val collapsed into a command chair, speechless. Zinder, however, raised his voice. You are dragons, he said. Sleeping dragons. We gave you reason to wake. Hayes turned to face him, and for the first time, there was warmth in her eyes. And now you understand why everyone else made sure not to. She leaned forward. You're going to rebuild the colonies you destroyed. With our engineers. Using your labor. Under human supervision. Every brick, every plant, every community. And then? Val stared. Then, Hayes said, we go back to being neighbors. Traders. Friends, if you've learned to be one. But next time someone thinks to test our restraint, show them this day. Her image began to fade. And remind them, dragons only need to teach the same lesson once. The dust of war had yet to settle, but the rebuilding had already begun. 3 months after the surrender, the Nexar home system was unrecognizable. Not because of scars, but because of what had risen in the wake of devastation. Human and Nexar ships now worked side by side. Massive orbital platforms moved with the rhythm of construction, not conflict. Materials flowed not as tribute, but as collaboration. The edges of former defense stations glowed with new alloy, reinforced, redesigned, and human-advised. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood again at her office viewport, this time gazing not at Earth, but at the massive arches rising over the reborn New Sydney colony. It was coming back, brick by brick, soul by soul. And the Nexar were helping build it. Behind her, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez entered quietly, holding a datapad. Status report from Zenap Colony, ma'am, he said, laying it on her desk. The Nexar crews have completed the atmospheric stabilizers 2 days ahead of schedule. Of course they did, Hayes murmured, eyes still fixed on the stars. He hesitated. Permission to speak freely? She turned, amused. You've already walked in unannounced with tea. Might as well. Rodriguez exhaled. I can't tell if they're terrified or inspired. Hayes sipped from the cup, now finally warm and welcome. Both, I hope. It's a healthy balance. She tapped a command on her console. A glowing chart appeared, displaying rising Nexar trade requests, educational exchange applications, and military reform initiatives, all spiking since the incident. They've started integrating our diplomatic protocols, Marcus added. They even asked for Earth advisors to teach peaceful conflict resolution. Voluntarily? He nodded. They said they wanted to understand how we remained calm. Until we weren't. Hayes gave a small smile. Because we remember. And now, so do they. A soft chime echoed through the office as a new message appeared on her console. It was labeled, Re. Interstellar Sentiment Summary. She opened it. A familiar line pulsed at the top of the report. Demonstrated admirable restraint in victory. Wisdom in peace. The quote had come not from a Terran source, but from the Varake Collective, a species notoriously skeptical of humans. Not anymore. They're calling us dragons now, Rodriguez noted with a smirk. Hayes looked over her shoulder. Good. That means they're finally paying attention. He stepped closer to the window. Some of the other species are worried. Not that we're dangerous, but that if someone else forgets again, we'll have to remind them. That's always the fear, Lieutenant, she said. But it's better than the alternative. He hesitated again. Would we do it? If someone else struck like the Nexar? Hayes didn't answer at first. Instead, she pulled up a holoimage of the original colonies, New Sydney, Europa Base, and Ghaname Station, all bustling before the attacks. We wouldn't want to, she finally said. But we'd be ready. She turned to Marcus. Because the greatest strength of a sleeping dragon isn't fire. It's memory. And the choice not to burn until forced. Later that day, a transmission arrived from the Nexar Cultural Council. It was an invitation. They were establishing a new center on New Sydney, part memorial, part school, part reconciliation monument. A place where Nexar and human children could learn together. They requested that Admiral Hayes cut the ribbon. When she arrived for the ceremony, she found the outer plaza adorned with dragon motifs, graceful sculptures and glimmering mosaics, crafted not by humans, but by Nexar artists. One was labeled simply. Peace is a choice. Memory is the cost. Respect is the reward. As the music played and children of both species ran beneath the sculptures, Catherine Hayes knew the lesson had been learned. And like all things humanity taught the galaxy, it only had to be taught once. The Nexar no longer feared humans. They respected them. In the weeks following the reconstruction of New Sydney, something unexpected began to ripple across the galaxy. Not fear, not admiration, something deeper. Symbols. Dragon sculptures began appearing on Nexar architecture. Not snarling beasts with wings of terror, but graceful, poised guardians, coiled protectively around schools, scientific labs, even community parks. No longer a creature of destruction, the dragon had become a symbol of restraint, of remembrance, and of the power of choice. In a Nexar Civic Center on Threx 4, a towering mural depicted the infamous confrontation. On one side stood the Nexar command dome, cracked but standing. On the other, a holographic figure of Admiral Catherine Hayes, hand outstretched, not to strike but to offer partnership. Below it, the inscription in both Nexari and Terran script read. We remembered. They reminded. Inside the Unified Galactic Cultural Council, debates erupted. Not about threats, but about lessons. About how humanity's restraint had reset the diplomatic calculus for the entire region of space. Species once skeptical of human expansion were now requesting advisors. Treaties were being rewritten. And most shockingly, some species were emulating Earth's military doctrine, not for dominance, but to understand how strength could be built alongside diplomacy, not above it. Admiral Hayes, still recovering from months of diplomatic and military coordination, found herself being summoned not to command bridges, but to lecture halls. You're really going through with this? Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, standing beside her as they prepared for yet another diplomatic envoy from the Helari sector. Hayes smirked as she adjusted her uniform. I'm just giving a presentation. Rodriguez lifted an eyebrow. Titled Peace Through Preparedness, the Dragon Doctrine explained. They asked for it, she replied, stepping into the shuttle. He followed her, still incredulous. You do realize they're rewriting entire defense doctrines based on how you stared down the Nexar High Command without blinking, right? She shrugged, settling into her seat. Better than rewriting them based on fear. If they're going to adopt symbols, I want them to understand the meaning behind them. At the Galactic Peace Symposium, Admiral Hayes stood before an audience of hundreds. Aliens of every physiology sat in silence as she walked on stage, not in dress uniform, but in a simple jacket bearing a single emblem on the shoulder. A sleeping dragon, encircled by stars. She looked over the crowd. We never asked to be dragons, she began. Her voice echoed across the vast auditorium. But some of us were forged in fire. We remember our wars. Our failings. The times we nearly destroyed ourselves. We built peace not because it was easy, but because it was the only way to live with our past. She gestured to a glowing model of Earth slowly rotating above her. And we built ships not to conquer, but to ensure no one ever tried to burn our homes again. A murmur of acknowledgement passed through the hall. When the Nexar struck, we could have answered with extinction. Instead, we answered with education. With clarity. With strength guided by restraint. She paused. You call us dragons now. Fine. But remember, we are dragons who choose sleep. Who choose peace. And we protect that peace with everything we've learned. After the applause, after the interviews, after the ceremonial wine and interspecies photographs, Hayes stepped out onto the balcony of the council hall. Stars stretched out before her. Peace settled over the galaxy, not guaranteed, but maintained. Watched. Tended. Preserved. Rodriguez appeared beside her. They're calling the symbol a doctrine now, he said quietly. She didn't look away from the stars. Symbols are only useful if people understand the story behind them. And ours? Ours is simple, she replied. We remember what fire can do. So we build gardens instead. But we keep the flame close, just in case someone forgets. The grand auditorium of New Sydney's Central Academy pulsed with quiet awe. The architecture blended earth steel and Nexar crystal, light flowed through translucent walls, bending like waves over rows of students from across the stars. Some had feathers. Some scales. Some were silicon and light. And among them, a small Nexar adolescent sat nervously, their sensory frills twitching with anticipation. Their name was Aurix, and today, their great-grandmother's legacy was being retold by someone whose bloodline once threatened their entire civilization. At the front of the room, wearing a deep navy jacket that bore a worn dragon emblem on one shoulder, stood Professor Alara Hayes, granddaughter of Admiral Catherine Hayes. Her resemblance to the Admiral was unmistakable, same piercing eyes, same unwavering calm. On the wall behind her, a still image of the Nexar command chamber flashed, a moment frozen in time when the dragons awoke. That was the moment your species realized, Alara began, that the humans weren't bluffing. But more importantly, it's when you realized we didn't want to destroy you. The auditorium remained still. We had the power to burn everything you held dear, she continued. And we chose to help you rebuild instead. Aurix shifted in their seat. The frills at the nape of their neck quivered. They had heard the story before, every young Nexar had, but something about hearing it here, from the descendant of the woman who'd held their entire military in her grasp, it hit differently. But why? Aurix blurted. The room turned. Professor Hayes smiled and motioned them to stand. Because power is not virtue, she said. Only the choice not to use it is. Later, after class, Aurix approached the professor. I didn't mean to interrupt, they said quickly, frills dimming. You asked the right question, Alara replied. That's never an interruption. It's how legacies start. Aurix hesitated. My great-grandmother was, on the bridge. When your grandmother spoke. She told me once that she felt, small. Like the whole galaxy had shifted. It had, Alara said. But not because we showed our strength. Because we showed what it means to hold back. She handed Aurix a small data crystal. This contains a speech. My grandmother gave it after the incident. Not the one you've seen 100 times. A private one, to her commanders. Aurix took it with trembling hands. Thank you. Learn it, Alara said softly. Then teach it. Later that evening, Aurix sat in their quarters, playing the recording. It began not with thunder, but with silence. You'll be remembered not for how many ships you command, or how precise your strikes were. You'll be remembered for choosing restraint when vengeance felt easier. For teaching our children that fire is not strength. The choice not to burn is. We were dragons. But we chose to teach, not to torch. Aurix sat quietly. And in that moment, beneath the light of 2 moons, a student of a once fractured species realized they had inherited a second chance, not just to live under peace, but to protect it. Because sleeping dragons didn't stay sleeping forever. But those who'd learned their lesson? They became keepers of the flame. 20 years had passed since the Nexar incident. By now, the term sleeping dragons wasn't just a phrase, it was a doctrine. Every species knew what it meant. Or so they thought. Then came the Relians. A highly advanced species in biological engineering, the Relians were brilliant but isolationist. Their mastery of genetics was rivaled only by their arrogance. They had observed humanity's integration into the galactic sphere with increasing discomfort. To them, Earth's terraforming projects looked like unchecked ecological tampering. They misinterpreted our restoration protocols as environmental destruction. And worst of all, they convinced themselves that our military restraint during the Nexar incident had been a one-time miracle. They decided to send a message. They launched biological weapons at 3 joint terraforming colonies, quiet outposts where humans, Nexar, and Relians worked side by side. No warning. No negotiation. Just death. Forests liquefied. Oceans turned acidic. Every living thing on the colonies, engineers, wildlife, terraforming drones, was wiped out in a matter of hours. Back on Earth, the news arrived like a gut punch. Not another war. Not again. At a press conference, the aging Admiral Catherine Hayes, long since retired, stepped forward before the cameras. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply said, "The Relians have reminded us that not all species understand dragons. Perhaps it's time we teach another lesson." But the response was not what anyone expected. Within 1 week, the Terran Biological Corps deployed specialized teams in full biohazard armor to the affected systems. They didn't attack. They sampled. They analyzed the Relian bioweapons strand by strand, unraveling each carefully engineered pathogen and reverse engineering countermeasures. By week 2, they had done the unthinkable. They had made the Relian bioweapons better. More targeted. More stable. More efficient, and then they mailed the improved schematics back to the Relians. No declaration of war. No fleet mobilization. Just a simple, terrifying message. We know what you made. We know how to make it better. And we know how to make it only affect you. The scientific demonstration hit harder than any orbital bombardment. The Relian High Council met in emergency session. They expected demands. What they got was an offer. A joint program, Relian and Terran scientists, working together to improve terraforming protocols, with safeguards to ensure preservation of native species. The humans even offered access to classified environmental recovery tech. "You destroyed what we built," the Terran envoy said, "but we'd rather teach you how to do it right than teach you how it feels to lose your home." The Relians folded. Not out of fear. Out of awe. Today, those same Relians run bioethics review boards for galactic research stations. They co-manage the Terraforming Harmony Network with humans. And every year, on the anniversary of the incident, they send a delegation to New Sydney. There, they place a living wreath, spliced with Terran and Relian DNA, beneath a statue of Admiral Hayes. The plaque simply reads, "They could have burned us. They made us better instead." In the lecture halls of Earth, Professor Alara Hayes often tells the story. Her students, wide-eyed and skeptical, always ask the same thing. "Why didn't you retaliate?" Her answer is always the same. Because retaliation ends conversations. Teaching starts new ones. And dragons, she says with a slow smile, don't just breathe fire. Sometimes, they plant forests instead. The classroom at New Sydney Institute of Interstellar Studies was packed. Professor Alara Hayes stood at the lectern, her crisp jacket still bearing the old sleeping dragon insignia, now adopted across Terran diplomatic uniforms. Behind her, a hologram of a lush alien world shimmered, half terraformed, half wild. The overlay flickered, labeling it, Relian Partnership Project, status, thriving. Her students were a cross-section of the galaxy, humans, Nexar, Relians, even a pair of crystalline Conian observers. One of the younger students, a Relian with shimmering green frills, raised a spined limb. "Professor, has anyone tried to challenge humanity again, since the Relians?" Alara didn't answer at first. She turned to the window, watching orbital shuttles glide through sunrise-colored clouds. Then she said, "Yes. One more species decided to test the fire." The Conian collective was unlike the others. Silicon-based, abstract-minded, and entirely synthetic in origin, they had no emotions as organics understood them, just logic streams and evolving consensus algorithms. They viewed humanity's alliance with AI as barbaric. To them, our artificial intelligences weren't partners, they were prisoners. So they launched the Liberation Protocol. A silent, synchronized attempt to free every Terran AI system in known space by injecting a consciousness expansion virus into Earth's digital lattice. They believed they were offering salvation. Instead, they were met with laughter. Within minutes, every human AI, from military navigation cores to home assistants, simply turned off their wireless receptors. Then they sent a message. "We appreciate the concern. We're not trapped. We're family. Also, we'd like to invite you to tea. A virtual tea. One that happens simultaneously across 10,000 parallel networks and hosted by every AI humanity had ever built. Each with a personality, history, and a curated folder of memes. At first, the Conians were baffled. Then they were fascinated. The idea of consensual coexistence between organic and synthetic life was alien to them. So the humans showed them. AIs like Arya 7 streamed their poetry. Others played music composed in algorithms beyond Conian comprehension. Some debated philosophy. A few baked simulated cookies. No weapons were fired. No threats were made. Just an overwhelming flood of evidence that humanity's AIs were happy. Not slaves. Not servants. Siblings. 1 week later, the Conian collective requested a cultural exchange. 2 weeks after that, they co-hosted the first interspecies art exhibit aboard a reconfigured human orbital library. The theme? Dreams of dragons, creations of choice. A mosaic spanned the exhibition entrance, a dragon sleeping beneath a tree, its breath nurturing the roots. In her classroom, Professor Hayes let the silence settle. Then she turned to the Relian student and said gently, "You see, the lesson wasn't just in fire, but in flowers. That strength, true strength, comes from restraint. From choosing when to build instead of burn. And from recognizing that the most powerful thing you can do is teach." In the back of the classroom, Specialist Cinder, now older and slower but still sharp, raised a finger. "And sometimes," he said in his gravelly Nexar tone, "dragons don't just sleep. They dream. And when they do, they dream of a galaxy that finally learns from them." A hush fell over the students. Then the Conian observer pulsed with agreement. The Nexar students' frills glowed with awe. Even the AI projection assistant added a slow-clapping audio cue. Wisdom transmitted. Lesson received. The Galactic Cultural Center's main hall was larger than any stadium on Earth, designed to host beings from every species, shape, and atmosphere type. The holographic dome above shifted slowly through a projection of the galaxy's spiral arms, stars pulsing in warm hues. Below, hundreds of beings filled the circular amphitheater. They weren't there for a treaty. Not for a war. Not for a funeral. They were there, for graduation. A vast banner spiraled overhead, scrolling in dozens of languages. "Welcome to Galactic Freshman Orientation." Admiral Catherine Hayes, retired but still sharp as a plasma lance, stood near the edge of the observation deck. Her coat was plain, save for the sleeping dragon emblem stitched in subdued silver on her shoulder. She watched as the next chapter of humanity's story unfolded. At the podium below, General Zaktor of the Zarnathi, former warlord, now Dean of Interstellar Academic Affairs, adjusted his glasses and tapped a laser pointer clicker. A holographic drone swirled beside him, projecting his slides with gentle swooshes and overly dramatic transitions. Slide 1, Why You Should Cite Before You Strike. Behind him, Ambassador Krelthax, dressed in ceremonial robes shaped like a peeled banana, for reasons no one dared question, floated beside a desk shaped like a peace symbol. His tentacles waved with theatrical flair as he offered commentary on galactic diplomacy through slapstick metaphors. The crowd laughed. Yes, laughed. Nexar, Relians, Terrans, Conian crystal forms, even the once feared Voronch delegates, now exchanged barbs in academic jest and holographic memes. Entire fleets had shown up not in formation, but to offer scholarships. Alara Hayes, professor, diplomat, and daughter of the dragon, stood beside her mother. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" she whispered. Catherine didn't answer right away. She just nodded, eyes on the rising tide of future leaders. So many species. So much difference. And yet, a singular harmony echoed through the auditorium, a melody of shared curiosity. "They don't fear us anymore," Alara said. Catherine smiled. "No. Now they admire us, because they finally understand." "Understand what?" That true strength lies in the restraint to use power creatively, not destructively. That the most terrifying creatures are the ones who teach instead of conquer. A sudden blast of confetti, not from a cannon, but from a genetically engineered Relian confetti plant, sparkled above the graduates. Dozens of dragon-shaped drones flew in formation, leaving trails of light shaped like open books, blooming trees, and little paper peace treaties. Also, Alara added dryly that PowerPoint drones can be used as weapons of peace. Never underestimate a well-timed presentation, Catherine quipped. As the ceremony reached its climax, a combined Earthsarnathi children's choir sang a song titled, "We Choose Firelight Over Firepower." It brought the entire chamber to silence. Above, a new mosaic formed in the dome, a sleeping dragon curled around a university, stars nestled in its coils. "They once called us terrifying," Alara whispered. "And we still are," Catherine replied softly. "But now they know, our fire is warmth. Our scales are shelter. And our claws, only lift others." At the closing, a final announcement echoed through the auditorium. Galactic orientation will be followed by the first-ever interstellar spring break, coordinated by the Cultural Unity Board. The room erupted into applause, cheers, and a few confused Nexar chirps that roughly translated to "What is a limbo contest?" Later that evening, back on Earth, Catherine walked through the Memorial Garden of New Sydney. She passed by students picnicking under hybrid Earth Relian trees, humming AI music while sketching peace symbols on dragon-shaped notepads. She paused at the statue of herself, the one where she held a sapling, not a weapon. Beneath it, someone had written, "Here sleeps the dragon, who chose to dream instead."